I fly about 250,000 miles a year. That's a lot of frequent flyer miles. Man, when they see me coming at United Airlines, they get a red carpet. They roll it out. They wanted to give me stock, but it's not worth anything. I hope they get that straightened out. I don't know if we'll be able to fly pretty soon. But I get around. I see a lot of things. I've preached in every state except Hawaii, and I have 3 invitations sitting on my desk for Hawaii right now. I've preached in all the Canadian provinces except Newfoundland, and I've been invited there several times. I've got an invitation on my desk there inviting me to come up and hunt a moose. They think they can get me that way, and they probably can. But I get around. I've seen a lot. I've been north to south and east to west inside the Catholic Church. And that's a great blessing, and it gives me a certain insight. Morale in the priesthood is lower than it has ever been in my lifetime, for sure, without any question. You have to do something about it. Now, you're the good guys. I know that. You're the solid Catholics. You're the pillars of the church, and I have the greatest respect for you. You have a job to do. You need your priests, and I tell you something, your priests really need you. A lot of times, it goes right over the average Catholic's head. You know, the father, he's with the people all the time, but you got to remember, you all go home together. He goes home alone. And if he is not very, very careful, the loneliness can get to him. When a man is ordained, it doesn't somehow change him into something other than human. He's still human, subject to all the same sins as anybody else. So do not be shocked when priests fall and fall hard. Should we be held to a higher standard? Oh, yes, we should be. But do not be surprised if we fall. I was talking with my superior in July. He celebrated his 50th anniversary of ordination in the first priest that joined him in the Society of Our Lady. They both celebrated 50 years, and I preached at the Mass, the anniversary Mass. The bishop, a wonderful friend of ours, Bishop Rene Gracita, celebrated the Mass down in Corpus Christi, Texas, and I preached the homily. And I noted how, in reflecting back, there were 12 priests who had helped me a great deal in my journey toward the priesthood. Only one of them is left. And they didn't all die. Several of them are gone because of these scandals. That article I read, 6 priests gone. Now, listen, you know me, most of you do. I am not soft on crime, so to speak, okay? I call good and evil by their proper name. I don't call sin anything other than what it is, sin. In those cases, those priests had made a mistake 25 to 40 years ago. It happened once. It never happened again. And they had 25 to 40 years of productive, fruitful, holy ministry. They're gone forever. And there's something wrong with that. I'm not saying we shouldn't deal with it. We must deal with these terrible things. But we have to look at them on a case-by-case basis. Now, that's not to say anything against the bishops, because the poor bishops, God help them. They have the hardest job in the world, and far be it from me to criticize the bishops for anything. But that being said, I'll criticize them anyway. Praying for them and asking the good Lord to help them out. It's not an easy, you know, they're between a rock and a hard place. I mean, it's just not easy, let's face it. We've got to pray. We've got to pray mightily for our priests. No priest, no Eucharist. No priest, no source, center, and summit of the church's life. No priest, the church becomes very hollow in a hurry. The Holy Father tells a story how after the Nazis and then the communists marched into Poland, the priests were persecuted. Notice that whenever violent dictatorship, whether it's the Nazis or the communists, when they march in, it's interesting that the priests are first on the hit list. Very, very interesting. Not that they're so smart, but Satan is smart, and he knows who to take out first. And don't you think that that's not who's behind it, because it is. In my era in the 60s, during the Vietnam War, I remember speaking to some of the men in special forces when they came back. They had found priests nailed to the floor of their churches, hands and feet nailed to the floors of their churches in the form of a cross. They would take nails and pound them into the skull just short of the brain so that it wouldn't kill them, but it would cause terrible swelling, terrible pain, and they would lie there nailed to the floors of their churches for days, and then they would die. The priest, always the priest, that the devil tries to take out first. Why? Because he knows where the power is. 2 Thessalonians has an extremely interesting passage. Talks about the restrainer, that man of lawlessness. Now, I don't get into interpretation of Scripture that, you know, what do I know? But I'll tell you, when that passage, whenever I see it, I can't help but thinking that's got to be the Holy Eucharist. That's the restrainer. The Holy Eucharist is pure power. Listen, if you don't believe that, I'm going to tell you how to find out. Got an abortion clinic in your community? Tell you what you do. I've said this many times. You get the closest property you can find and rent it. Buy it. Do whatever it takes, and then you get the bishop to put in a chapel of perpetual adoration. And then you watch what happens. The flames will drive the devil out eventually. It will happen. It has to happen. It's pure power. That's the Holy Eucharist. We believe that in the Catholic Church. Listen, I could spend weeks and months showing you that the Catholic Church, in fact, believes that's where the power is. The problem is there is a gap, a very major gap, between what we profess and what we live. When enough of us, we who are called Catholics, meaning the ones who have the fullness of Christianity, when enough of us Catholics begin to live what we profess, when the Holy Eucharist truly is the very source, center, and summit of our existence, when we put it in the center of our life, when it becomes everything for us, the Eucharist is where we go for strength. The Eucharist is where we go to speak to the Lord, to enter into his passion, death, and resurrection. When we begin to live that vibrantly, enough of us, all of these evils that you see in the world today, these evils will be vanquished. But until we do that, they will not. Now, I have said things like what I'm going to say here many times before, and I want to tell you something. They have almost always come true. And it's not because I'm a prophet. It's because I have about that much common spiritual sense. Anybody can come up with this. Now, don't do it. Don't go before the Blessed Sacrament. Don't promote perpetual adoration. Don't promote holiness in the church. Let the priests continue to decline in holiness and take their ease. And what happened on September 11th will look like a walk in the park, because what's coming will be much more horrific than that. If we do not stand in the gap, if we do not take up the battle cry of the Holy Eucharist, then our beloved country will go down in flames and fire. And I don't ever want to see that, because I love my country, and I know you do too, and I don't abandon my country in her hour of need. And through indifference or cowardice, I don't fail to say what needs to be said. Rally around the Blessed Eucharist. This is not a mere something. It is a divine somebody. Jesus Christ, true God and true man. When enough of us come to the Lord and fall down, worshiping Him, offering reparation, thanking Him and praising Him, then, and only then, will things begin to change. But the way that you will be able to tell that it is not happening is through a trail of violence, war, and unbelievable human suffering. Just watch what happens in the next few years if we don't get busy. And the way to do it is to turn to Mary. Turn to your mother, the mother of the Lord, the mother of the most holy Eucharist. Jeff mentioned about the Holy Father canonizing more saints than anyone. I'm going to tell you a fact of spiritual life. Not one saint who was ever canonized didn't have a tremendous devotion to the Blessed Virgin Mary. Not one of them, not one. Therefore, get a clue. You know, some of these people today, including some of the priests, who don't want to allow the rosary. I saw it once, God help us. The people wanted to pray the rosary, and the priest said, get this. Now, he never listened to one of my talks. He said, it's not biblical. The rosary is not biblical. It's the prayer of the gospel. The mysteries, right out of the gospel. The prayers, Our Father, Hail Mary, where did we get those? Right out of the gospel. You draw close to your mother, and your mother will draw close to you, especially in these troubled times. I'm going to talk about Our Lady as the mother of the Most Holy Eucharist. That might sound like a funny title to some people, but we know that the Eucharist substantially is Jesus Himself, and she's His mother. You know, I could also put a subtitle on that talk on the Blessed Mother I'll give tomorrow, and the subtitle could be, Your Mama Wears Combat Boots. And don't you forget it. Your mama wears combat boots. She is the leader of an army, a tremendous army that's set in battle array, that is now ready to march against the very gates of hell. It may seem like we are outnumbered. It may seem like hell has been emptied, and you've got all the demons in front of you, behind you, to the left and to the right. But I'll tell you what, with Mary to lead you, you can scale any wall. You can knock down any stronghold. So you get close to your mother. And I'll tell you this, your mother will draw you close to the Holy Eucharist. The Eucharist, the power of God, God himself. God bless you.